What mysterious thing do you know? Stéphane Mallarmé wrote that the job of the writer is to purify the language of the tribe. The same is true of painters, to purify the forms of the tribe. Artists are part of a tribe, an all-volunteer army who wear the face paint of mandrills and speak in tongue. This isn't agency, it's blood. To be an artist is to be part of a family. The first sentence in E.H. Gombrich's The Story of Art says it best. There really is no such thing as art. There are only artists. What mysterious thing do you know? A stranger asked it of me, and I ask it of you. I don't have a direct answer, so I'll come at it from the side. There's a poem by my old friend Samuel Minash called The Stars Are, which I've memorized. Allow me to recite it. The stars are, although I do not sing about them. The sky and the trees are indifferent to whom they please. The rose is unmoved by my nose, and the garland in your hair, although your eyes be lakes, dies. Why sigh for a star? Better bay at the moon. Better bay at the moon. Oh, moon, moon, moon. The poem begins with the narrator lamenting nature's indifference to human beings, remarking that the rose is unmoved by my nose, the skies and trees don't care whom they please, the garland in your hair dies. And just when all seems lost, the narrator, realizing how insignificant he or she is, asks, why sigh for a star? Better bark at the moon. The poet is reminding us to see the obvious thing before the superhuman thing. The last line is both chant and prayer. Oh, moon, moon, moon. Just saying the word moon 3 times puckers my lips like a howling wolf. Each time the word moon is repeated, it becomes bigger and closer until it fills our entire field of vision. And suddenly, the ordinary becomes miraculous. Not because of any special scientific lunar power, but because the narrator was there to behold it. There is no such thing as natural beauty. The stars and the moon are natural, but they are not beautiful until we declare them so. Beauty is summoned by our presence. That's the mysterious thing I know. What causes what? Why are human beings compelled to make things that serve no practical purpose whatsoever? A work of art doesn't heat homes or purify water. Yet we fill concert halls, theaters, museums, and billions of pages in books dedicated to what Picasso called the lie that tells the truth. A work of art shouldn't always have a point of view. When you point fingers in someone's face, it limits their experience, and they usually end up leaving the same as when they came in. There was no transformation. There must be transformation. What causes what? At what point does an orchid become pure visual propulsion? At what point do lyrics become pure audible propulsion? When I eat a Krispy Kreme donut, at what point does it stop being a donut and start being me? An artist's job is to pay attention to the smaller truths that orbit the larger ones, each worthy of our full consideration. Let us stand in your shoes and peer through your eyes. You'll never run out of subject matter. Remember, you're not making a map of the land, but of the path you took to arrive at this place. I paint because I can never see enough places, so I return to one. Only then can the obvious become superhuman, the tamed, untamed. Oh, moon, moon, moon. I generally do 2 solo shows per year, and each show takes about 8 months to make, and each show consists of 8 to 12 paintings depending on the gallery size. So 2 recent shows in Santa Fe and Atlanta, and I got you a plane ticket next to me. Coach, Sorry. Fuck. I'm honored to be represented by Llewellyn Galleries in Santa Fe. This is my 4th solo exhibition with them. I took my son with me for some dad and boy time, and we had a blast, visiting ancient ruins, eating chili rellenos, and wandering ghost towns. I generally do 2 solo shows a year, and each show consists of 10 to 12 paintings created specifically for that gallery and geography. Although my work always refers to the coast of South Carolina, I considered the big skies and arid landscapes of New Mexico, as well as looked at artists ranging from William Lumpkins to Maria Martinez to Raymond Johnson. Katie and I have a Johnson painting in our collection and love its rhythmic use of color and form to evoke the forces of nature that hum below the surface of things. I look at Martinez for her sheer invention within limitations. She became famous for black-on-black pottery, featuring motifs drawn in matte and polished surfaces. In this painting of mine called Clam Bank 3, I'm using colors like raspberry and cool green to evoke the desert, but on an intimate scale, underscored by the rapid jump from the extreme foreground to the extreme distance. Tempest Tells Me, too, uses a similar pictorial space, but with spiky, prickly energy, evocative of the tangled vines and deep subterranean water tables, but always with the appearance of firm earth in the foreground, as if you spun around and were inside the painting. This idea has more to do with the primacy of touch than sight. That's why you have to see a painting in the flesh, not on a screen, because touch is a more important sense than sight for survival. We can't move a foot in front of us without first knowing if there is something solid to stand on or something concrete to bump into and avoid. A tree trunk always feels the same to my fingers, but its appearance to my eyes varies depending on the light, weather, or from what angle I see it. The first thing I apprehend when standing before a painting isn't the illusory space, accuracy of rendering, or even the subject matter, but the way it was made. I don't ask, what does it mean, but what am I looking at? What's more real, what you see or what you feel? Pablo Picasso painted objects not perceived, but conceived. To look at a painting is to take possession of something. Painting is, and always has been, about ownership. Painting presides over a kind of cultural inversion in which a verbal encounter is replaced with an aesthetic one. The best painting is the one you can't describe moments after seeing it. Here's a shot of the gorgeous gallery space before the opening reception. My son couldn't contain his excitement. If you want to see me discuss these paintings, go onto YouTube and type in Rutenberg on landscapes and abstraction. And on to Atlanta. I'm honored to be represented by 2 galleries in Atlanta, Georgia, and this will be my 6th solo exhibition with the gallery. Because I was back in my local neighborhood, so to speak, this body of paintings, entitled Banners of the Coast, drew from my decades-long obsession with the collision between natural and artificial landscapes. For example, a painting like Pillow and Petal 4 exudes the tangled wildness and humidity of my secret places in the Lowcountry. The key word here is wildness. I don't use the convention of linear perspective to push back deeper into pictorial space. I start in the back and press forward. I didn't learn this from Art Forum magazine, but by studying the shallow space of classical Baroque painters like Nicolas Poussin, who crowds his figures against the picture plane in a pretzel of overlapping forms. His figures suggest linear perspective, but still maintain their power as they recede. That makes me happy. If you can't get to a Poussin painting, then go outside and look at a tree. It's all there. A tree doesn't follow the laws of perspective, but is a complex bundle of overlapping and converging lines which makes sense from every viewpoint. This painting, called Pillow and Petal 2, uses the cobalt green of palmetto frond and soft compositions of shade to manufacture the stillness that I seek but never quite find. While Pillow and Petal 3 burns with the saturated neon colors of the arcades and carnivals of my youth, colliding head-on with the ancient riverine shapes of the South Carolina coast. Here's a quick pan of the show before the folks arrived for the reception. I say it all the time, I couldn't do what I do without my dealers doing what they do. I came of age here in New York City in the late 1980s and 90s, way back when Pluto was still classified as a planet. Cynicism and irony were all the fashion in the art world. Artists made paintings in order to mock painting. Classical beauty and emotion were seen as anti-intellectual and indulgent. Technique was object-driven. All that mattered were ideas. Yet, in the midst of all that cynicism, I was a fanboy. Perhaps that's because I didn't grow up around the art world. I grew up in South Carolina with no exposure to the arts. Whether it was Fangoria magazine or Stage Magic, I've always been a fanboy. I'm always attracted to anyone who is really interested in something because of their enthusiasm and attention to detail. I'll be able to learn something. I can't stand cynicism in art. Say what you mean from your heart. I still go to museums and galleries today, not as a painter, but as a fan. I learn more as a fan because it's harder to say why you like something than why you dislike it. The same applies to my studio. Every time I put down a skin of oil paint with my brush, I try to please you. Every time I choose a color, I try to choose the best color, not for me, but for you. I am your fan. Remember that every time you finish a painting, it might be the first painting someone will ever see in their life, or it might be the last. You owe it to them to tell the truth. Back in 1988, when I was in the MFA program here at the School of Visual Arts, one of my favorite teachers was a painter named Walter Darby Bannard. And I remember Darby called me on the payphone one day and said, "Bri, I'm sick, so I'm going to send in a substitute, but I'm worried that you're going to like the sub better than you like me." I said, "Darby, don't worry, just get better." At teaching, he said. I still don't know to this day if he was kidding, but Darby went on to be one of my best role models. He even wrote the foreword to my first monograph. One of the advantages of being in that program in the late 80s was the people who came through my studio, from Robert Rauschenberg to Al Held to Louise Nevelson. One afternoon, Darby brought Clement Greenberg to my studio. Greenberg was arguably the most influential art critic of the 20th century and played a vital role in the promulgation of abstract expressionism and the careers of Jackson Pollock, Clifford Still, Hans Hofmann, and many other painters. In his seminal essays, Avant-Garde and Kitsch, and Modernist Painting, Greenberg emphasized purely formal concerns over descriptive or pictorial references. In other words, art needed no purpose other than its inherent beauty, as the value of an artwork was thought to be found mainly in its structural elements of color, form, and line. To put it more bluntly, what you see is what's there, and what's there is what matters. It was like tasting bubblegum for the first time. Here was a titan of the 20th century talking to a 20th birthday man-child from Myrtle Beach. But my work must have made somewhat of an impression because he said it had a pastoral mood. Now, for context, my work was different back then. Because I had little money to buy art supplies, I hauled bundles of cardboard up from the New York streets and created multi-paneled paintings on which I drew with electrical tape, wire, polyurethane, charcoal, and enamel house paint. These cardboard environments were organic and open-ended. They swelled into every part of the room, incorporating the radiator, windows, and fire escape. So when Clement Greenberg told me that my work had a pastoral mood, I thought he meant peaceful and innocent, but I wasn't sure. So I ran to the library and read every essay of his I could get my hands on. As with most of my life, the value of that information came not in what I comprehended, but in what I misunderstood. What I mean is that when the transfer of knowledge from book to brain isn't entirely accurate, you end up filling in the blanks yourself. You make stuff up. You get bored. And over time, you begin to think for yourself. You begin to think creatively. Now, thinking for yourself creatively isn't good if you're an air traffic controller or a pulmonologist, but for an artist, it's a job description. I was young and I didn't have the mental bandwidth to think like a critic, so I thought like a painter. Here's my point. Facts provide knowledge, but not necessarily understanding. I read everything I could get my hands on, but I had to live and love a little in order to have content. My teacher, Michael Tyzak at the College of Charleston, told me, work beyond your understanding. In other words, don't think, just do. The important stuff will make itself apparent in the appropriate moment, but for now, show up. That was 38 years ago, and I've learned some stuff. Here's how the pastoral mood really applies to my work, and maybe yours too. Greenberg described the pastoral as the preoccupation with nature at rest, human beings at leisure, and art in movement. However, the pastoral begins not in frivolity, but tension. I grew up in one place that had two faces. Myrtle Beach is a resort town, pulsating with saturated neon light, surrounded by some of the most haunting landscapes in the Deep South. I paid attention, and what I saw was miraculous. Two landscapes, one artificial and one natural, colliding head-on at 200 miles an hour, smashing so violently into one another that they seemed to produce a third thing. That third thing is tension. When I'm in my studio, I think, I am painting this painting right now. Don't miss it. In other words, the painting shouldn't look like any particular thing, but the thing that was happening in that particular moment. Kind of like a skid mark on the road indicates both object and action, yet is eternally in the present tense. The pastoral is also born of contradiction. According to Greenberg, the two primary characteristics of the pastoral in modern art are a dissatisfaction with the moods prevailing in society's centers of activity, and a conviction of the stability of society in one's own time. In other words, a retreat from civilization made possible by the safety of civilization. For me, this means painting nature by turning my back to it. I can visualize the Deep South more vividly because I live 666 miles north. I am not a nature painter, but an unnature painter. Nature looks best laid out on my studio table. In his essay, The Role of Nature in Modern Painting, Greenberg wrote, by describing and analyzing nature in a simplified way, artists discovered the internal structure of the picture plane. To put it more bluntly, painters went from being matchers to makers. We bend the laws of nature to fit the laws of art. There's a reason the first three letters of the word artificial are art. My connection to the landscape of South Carolina has nothing to do with nostalgia. It's much broader than memory. It's my clear-seeing place, always in the present tense. According to Greenberg, Genuinely pastoral art never returns to the past. It simply rejects one present in favor of another, and without escapism. I study art history precisely so that I don't emulate it. I don't do what they did. I look at and read about paintings of the past not out of respect, but disrespect. In other words, to take them down off their pedestals and examine them as a series of problems and solutions to be addressed in the studio. Any studio. However, there are some Greenbergian ideas that I don't agree with, such as the rift between high and low art, or what he called elevated versus debased. I grew up in Myrtle Beach, for Christ's sake. My first reality was kitsch, and I adore it. Garishness, sentimentality, humor, and new things made to appear old fascinate me. Placing style over substance suggests a desperate, hasty type of love that is both humorous and melancholic. Kitsch embodies a respect for misplaced priorities that I find genuinely beautiful. Pablo Picasso and Walt Disney had the exact same job. A styrofoam column is just as mighty as a marble one. Greenberg also thought that art should be written about in a detached manner, only observing the physical properties of the object itself. I don't think it's possible to separate purely aesthetic concerns from real life. Art that comes from art is joyless, in my opinion, because the artist is aware that they are making art. And if it looks like art, it looks like someone else's. A painting should be inseparable from the painter, just as a knife cannot cut itself. Creativity isn't something you are, it's something you do. To inspire means to inhale, which speaks of the body, not the mind. It always comes back to the body. I don't want to stand in front of an idea, but a thoughtfully constructed thing that exists separate from myself, which provokes inwardness and brings me pleasure. Looking at a work of art is an act of self-compassion. Meditation begins in pleasure, not pain. So take care of yourself. I'm not talking about kale and jump rope, but feed your inner life. Children don't play when they're tired and hungry. They play when they're well-fed and rested. Pleasure is itself a form of knowledge. I didn't learn that from a book or from Clement Greenberg, but from sweet, sweet boredom. Art is highly orchestrated boredom. If you're in a hurry, you'll miss everything. To paraphrase Henry David Thoreau, an artist is someone who, having nothing to do, finds something to do.